Hi, this is Tom Brevoort, and you are listening to the Captain America Comic Fans Podcast.
Well, greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 190 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm Rick Fabanis. I'm your host, and I'm joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. His name is Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob. And I'm going to be high as a kite by then. I miss the Earth so much. I miss my wife. It's lonely out in space on such a timeless flight.
Very nice, Rick. Very nice. Little Elton John.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And what is that?
Rocket Man.
Rocket Man.
Yeah. It's just my job.
Burning out his fuse right here alone. Yeah. Good song.
Yeah.
Definitely a great song from 1972.
Yeah. And my brother, I have three older brothers. The middle one of the three, huge fan of Elton John. In fact, the first concert I ever attended, he took me to an Elton John concert when
That's cool.
I don't know how young I was. I was young. I remember we drove down there in his Trans Am, but he had every Elton John album, and so I spent a good part of my formative years listening to his Elton John albums. So it always makes me sentimental when I hear an Elton John song come on the radio.
Yeah, I hear you. Because you and I are in the same situation. We're youngest of a bunch of older siblings, and in some cases much older. So we grew up listening to their music. Right.
They're eight tracks. Yeah.
So I grew up listening to 60s and 70s classic rock.
Yeah.
And that was my music.
Right. Yeah. It always takes you back, huh?
Absolutely.
Takes you back.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why did I pick that song, and why did I pick those lyrics, Bob?
Oh my goodness! Now I can't remember the exact lyrics that you entertained us with, but I know that we're going to be exploring a little bit of Captain America number 10 from Volume 5 tonight, and it does have a bit of connection with that song because Steve Rogers becomes a rocket man.
He does. He does. Absolutely. He's an astronaut in this particular story coming up. I mean, heck, he was an astronaut in the last story we covered, right? From Volume 6,
right?
The Ed Brubaker, Steve McNiven. And now we're covering another Ed Brubaker story where Steve Rogers naturally just becomes an astronaut, after becoming Captain America. And the lyrics I picked out had, I miss the Earth so much. I miss my wife. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of that in this story today. Yeah. So I purposely picked those lyrics, although there's a lot of great lyrics in the song. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. In fact, it's cold as hell.
There you go. So there's some science for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey, all that science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week.
Elton is not only entertaining, but he's informing, he's educating us.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. I never knew Mars was that cold until I heard this song.
You didn't? Okay. Well.
Yeah. And it's interesting too that expression, cold as hell.
Yeah.
Because right? I always thought hell was supposed to be like, fire and brimstone and everything. But apparently hell can be whatever it is. Whatever is. Yeah. I think my hell would totally be cold because I hate the cold. I absolutely hate the cold.
Right.
I would kind of welcome a little fire. Come on.
Yeah.
Bring, I'm thin skinned and cold blooded and I totally would rather prefer the heat. But I think for me it would be probably cold, very, very, very cold. And then play some grunge music.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I do think, Rick, I think if you really think about it, and I don't know if many people have experienced like extremes on both ends of the spectrum, like really, really hot and really, really cold. But I do tend to agree with you. The most miserable I've ever been has been when I've been really, really cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you moved to Florida.
Yeah.
You moved to Florida, so we already know where you stand on the heat to cold spectrum, Bob.
Yeah. Well, I mean, years and years ago, the most miserable I ever was, where I thought, seriously, I'm going to die from this, was just being cold.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I felt miserable in hot weather, but I've never gotten to the point where I felt like this is going to kill me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, cold would be your own special hell.
Indeed. Indeed. So yeah, we're going to be talking today about Captain America Volume 5. This is the first Ed Brubaker volume that he did, and it's early on in this. So this particular issue 10 is a little different. And a little different, and you suggested it, and so I thought it was a good idea, and so we'll get into that today. Bob, anything else going on with you? What's your week been like?
Woo! It's just it's busy, Rick. It's how we do this every week. Gosh, it's been busy. We need to take a little more vacays, the two of us, and have a little more relaxation time.
I hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. We my wife and I were getting ready to sign our wills. That's been exciting. We're going to do that tomorrow. This is something
now blink twice if it's against your will.
Well, I do want to point out something though. So, my dad passed away in January several months ago, and so it got us thinking, like, well, we have a kid who's 14, and we, Casey and I, as my wife, we travel quite a bit, and if something were to happen to us, we need to make sure that that he's taken care of. And I thought of this because when my dad passed, his will said that I was owed a college education. So that's the last time it had been updated. So I'm fighting that in court. I want to go back. I'm already planning on pledging a fraternity. But anyway, setting that aside, we thought we got to do this. We got to make sure everything's taken care of, and we got to figure out, like, at what point, like, who's going to take him, like, who are we going to put him with, and like at what point does he get the money, right? Whatever inheritance there might be, what age, all that sort of stuff. And so we get that all sorted out. But there's a document in the back. Now it's like a 50-page document, right? And in the back of the document, there is a special couple pages where you get to fill out specific items.
Oh,
yes.
Now, Dr. eBay, I'm sure, he's already he's like, yeah, let's do this.
Right. So I'm still playing with that a little bit. I wanted to make sure. I'm like, no, this is those sorts of things don't have to wait till he becomes of age. So I'm wrestling with, should I just make sure, like, if I were to pass away, do I really want this stuff going to my wife? I think that might be a mistake. Right? Because she likes to declutter.
Wait a minute. Wait. I was underneath the impression, because you don't take anything out of its box, that everything was going with you.
Wouldn't that be great, right? That would definitely, I would require a larger mausoleum than I'm planning. But yeah. So anyway, I'm wrestling with this form, Rick, and trying to fill it out, and like all these things. I want this definitely to go to my son, and if he doesn't want it, then it goes to this person, sort of thing. And if he doesn't want it, then they're gonna have a free for all on the Captain America comic book fans Facebook group.
That's right.
It's going to be a claim auction, no price, just free. First come, first serve. So.
Oh, well, you know what? That's great, because I approve all posts. So I get first dibs. That's awesome.
First dibs.
I don't approve all posts. We have other moderators. I'm just telling you right now. So if anything ever got disapproved, don't just blame me.
Nice cover. Yeah, cover yourself there. Good job.
In fact, Bob's the one who cancels a lot of stuff.
I do. Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. I know, my wife and I, we gotta get together a will one of these days.
Yeah.
Smart thing to do, especially because my dad passed away in his 50s. So it's one of those things where, there's gonna come a point, a few years, we're gonna be like, wow, I lived to be older than my dad.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just going to be crazy.
That's probably a little mind blowing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do encourage you to do it. You got to take care of those things. Put it. It's so much. When we went, and had that family meeting, and my dad's will was there, and we looked at it, and like, this is what he wants: A, B, C, D, E. Takes all the pressure off
Mhm.
of the kids, right? And certainly, I know you don't want that on your kids' back. I certainly don't want it on mine. And so it's a peace of mind knowing that they can worry about grieving and not worry about all this other stuff.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. My kids would be like, "I don't want another Captain America thing. I already have the Philadelphia Eagle thing."
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, keep me in mind.
Hey, Bob, what do you think of my shirt, man?
I love this shirt. That's the Brian Hitch shirt that I think I saw you post a picture of in the group, right?
Yeah, I picked it up on Free Comic Book Day. It was on sale. I'm a sucker for a deal, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
It was 25% off. So, $15 for a
Yeah.
for a really nice t-shirt.
For a nice T-shirt, can't go wrong with
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I
Nice.
can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
So I just wish I had this when we were interviewing Brian Hitch, so I could be
Yeah.
like, "Hey,"
Hey, check me out, man.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
oh well.
I miss free comic book days. I don't have a local comic book shop down here, so I don't
Mm,
I don't get in on the excitement. No,
yeah. Yeah,
or any comic book day for that matter.
when I went to my local comic shop, I actually was rocking my Free Comic Book Day T-shirt from 2009,
Uh huh.
which was the last year my store
Wow.
um, hosted. Because then I sold the store, a few
Yeah.
months later, and then I kept the T-shirt, and then I wear it, first
That's
Saturday
cool.
in May.
That's cool. That's
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's awesome. I mean, we got to make that case, right? If you got a local comic shop, go to your local comic shop, because there's a lot of folks like me. Like, they don't have one, and
yeah.
if you don't go to it, you're not going to have one either. So
Yeah. Or there are a lot of folks like me who owned a local comic shop and really
yeah,
appreciates your business, as opposed to like, well, I'm just going to buy it online or something like that.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely
yeah.
check out your local comic book stores. Bob, should we
Mhm.
get to today's comic?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're covering today Captain America Volume 5, number 10. And this had a cover date of October 2005. So I actually had my store during this time, and this was Captain America was starting to pick up in sales with this new volume. So it was really cool to see. I remember having this comic on the shelf, and what else was really big during this time, Bob, was a crossover in Marvel Comics called House of M. And so
Yeah,
House of M standing for Magneto. Some people think it's House of Mutant, but I've always thought it was House of Magneto, because
huh?
that was, the house of Magneto was the patriarch, right?
Yeah,
Of the house. And so essentially, and we'll get to this in a minute. I'm going to read the opening blurb to the comic and it'll explain what the details of House of M. But the premise was that Scarlet Witch had kind of gone crazy due to grief over losing her children, and so she snapped and started turning on her fellow Avengers. Eventually, the X-Men and the Avengers tried to figure out how to stop her, and then she created, because she was so powerful, she redid reality into a whole nother world. And in this world, in the Marvel universe, is known as, because in Marvel there's different Earths, right? Like that's how they give a number to it. Like for instance, normal Marvel universe is known as the 616,
right. Yeah,
right? The House of M is known as 58163. So that is the universe of House of M. So this particular one-shot story is the House of M tie-in. So that's what we're going to cover today. As I said, it's written by Ed Brubaker, and stepping in for Steve Epting, stepping in for Mike Perkins is Lee Weeks. Now, Lee Weeks, fantastic artist. I loved his run on Daredevil. He had done many things over the years. He did you might remember this, Bob. He did a story arc, a 4-issue story arc in volume 4 of Captain America called Cap Lives.
Right. Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered that. And I want to say it was going back to episode 61. So this is, 130 episodes ago. But we covered Cap Lives, which is volume 4, issues 17 through 20. And it was a really cool alternate universe story of Cap fighting, the Red Skull. The Red Skull had won basically World War II, and America was now this dystopian place run by the Red Skull, and Cap lives and he fights it. But Lee Weeks did fantastic art in that story.
Indeed, he did. Yeah. And that story involved one of the slimiest insults the Red Skull has ever lobbed at Steve Rogers. You'll have to listen to that episode if you don't recall what it is in order to hear about it. So
yeah, episode 61. Check that out. And then so the I said it was a cover date of October 2005. The release date was actually September 21st. So yeah, I think it was running a little late. But they had Lee Weeks come in and do this one shot to kind of, fill in this particular story. The inkers, we had different inkers on here. We have Jesse Delperdang and Lee Weeks inked certain pages of the book, and then other pages of the book were finished, not inked, finished by Mike Perkins. And if you want to know what the difference between inking and finishing, then listen to any of the interviews we've had with famous inkers on the show. So, episode 8, we had the legendary Joe Rubenstein on to talk about it, and he gets into the differences between inking and finishing. And then John Beatty, we had on episode 43. He also talked about that. So just something to check out. Bob, I have been remiss. I actually missed birthdays. We didn't do birthdays this time around, and I missed a birthday last episode, right? So if you're listening to this when it comes out, this comes out on May 29th. Yesterday, May 28th, would have been, or is, I should say, the birthday for Scott Koblish.
All right. Happy birthday, Scott.
Yeah, Scott's an artist who has done inking. In fact, he inked Ron Garney on the Captain America series. And then he's done a lot of his own penciling over the years, too. He was a guest on the show back in episode 139.
Sure was. Yeah, we talked about one of my favorite Captain America stories of all time, right?
Which one is that, Bob?
The Taco Bell issue.
Oh, yes. The Taco Bell issue.
Yeah.
So the Taco Bell issue, we'll talk about that in a second, but we covered that the episode earlier of Scott Koblish. It was 138 where we do the Taco Bell Captain America story, who was written by Joe Caramagna.
Indeed.
Also birthdays, as I mentioned before, Joe Rubenstein. Joe Rubenstein's got a birthday coming up, which is going to be on June 4th. So happy early birthday to Joe Rubenstein.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
All right, Bob. So let's get to you know what? I forgot to mention the remainder. I'm doing so out of order on this. I apologize, everybody. So we mentioned the writer, we mentioned the penciler, we mentioned the inkers, colorist Matt Milla, letterer Randy Gentile, and then editor we have here Tom Brevoort. Bob, you want to take us through the cover?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So, it's a really eye-catching cover, Rick. We've got in the background here, it's sort of a subdued reddish, bluish cover, but it's really split into to two halves, right? And on the left half in the background, we see Cap and Bucky in World War II, and we see a bunch of soldiers. And again, this is sort of faded into the background. We see Hitler on the ground. We see, sort of victory. We can feel that in the air, right? Bucky's waving the American flag, and Cap's got his shield raised in the air as if he is, leading the troops forward on that final charge into perhaps Berlin. And on the right side, we see an Apollo capsule floating in space. We see a rocket, maybe a Saturn rocket, blasting off the ground into the sky, and we see an astronaut floating in the air. And on the helmet, it's written Rogers. So pretty amazing stuff. But in the foreground is where it gets really, really interesting. And there we see an older gentleman. And by older, I mean, he's looking maybe in his late 70s, early 80s. He's wearing a trucker cap. He's got an oversized jacket on and a white T-shirt. But he's holding Cap's cowl in his hand, and he has Cap's uniform draped over his left shoulder, and it looks like he's almost hugging it to himself. And in the background behind him, we see a bunch of newspapers, and you can just barely make out the headlines of some of them, but one of them it clearly seems to suggest that Captain America resigns. And another one, it says first mutant president. And then further on, we see references to Homo sapiens and mutants. And so there's a lot going on this cover. But I think we're led to assume here that this older gentleman is old man Steve Rogers.
Indeed. I never thought I'd hear the saying, and then here's Steve Rogers in a trucker hat.
It's a fashion trend.
Is it? Yeah. Well, you know what? It gave it away.
What's that?
It was the dimple on the chin.
The dimple on the chin, right?
Yeah.
Still has that, along with the sagging jowls. Yes. But the dimple's still there.
The other thing too is to point out that this is a House of M tie-in. They do have a trade dress of the red and white stripes along the side. So going up and down vertically on the page on the left-hand side. And then there is the House of M insignia up in the corner box area. So just to let people know, on the comic shelves as you're walking by, if you're a House of M fan and you wanted to get the tie-ins, there you go. There's a tie-in for you. All right, Bob, I'm going to grab my copy as we go ahead and go through this panel by panel. I'm going to grab it off the spinner rack here. Hey, look at this. Coincidentally, right above the issue is the Cap Lives issue by Lee Weeks.
Yeah, there it is.
Got to get the readers. All right, I'm going to read the opening here just to let everybody know what's going on with House of N. Unless Bob, do you want to do the honors?
I'd be happy to, Rick. If you want to rest your voice, have a snack or something. But yeah,
I'll just sit here and sip on this.
There you go. Wet your whistle. The New Avengers and the Astonishing X-Men met to discuss the fate of Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch, the daughter of the most powerful mutant terrorist, Magneto. After losing control of her reality-altering powers and suffering a total nervous breakdown, Wanda unleashed chaos upon the Avengers, killing and injuring many of their number. Magneto intervened and took his daughter to the devastated island nation of Genosha, where Charles Xavier, Professor X, the founder of the X-Men, was to help her recover. Xavier failed, and now it is up to Wanda's friends and teammates to decide whether she will live or die. But Magneto, Wanda, and her brother Pietro disappear. Then the world burns to white. Reality as we knew it is gone. to be replaced by a society in which humans are the oppressed minority and mutants run the culture, ruling over all existing countries, religions, and politics. A kingdom united under the House of M. During the dark days of the early 1940s, a covert military experiment turned a young and frail Steve Rogers into America's first super soldier, Captain America.
All right, so the opening page here it shows the New York City Veterans Hall, and then we cut into inside, and we see that someone is, there's a stage with a long banquet table along there, and people are sitting there, and out in the audience, you see tables there with people in military dress and guests. And I don't know, maybe there's a couple dozen people there.
Yeah,
there's
some empty chairs.
There's definitely empty chairs.
Yeah,
yeah. So not very esteemed going on here as far as you would think that you would get when someone who, as we're about to find out, Steve Rogers is going to be celebrated.
Sure. Yeah.
I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised. What was it my ex-wife used to say? You got everything you ever wanted, Steve Rogers. If the world didn't turn out how you thought it would, well, that's just life. Welcome to it. I still remember my granddad telling me and my brother all about seeing Captain America on the battlefield. The inspiration that this great man was to all those soldiers, and the risks that he and his partner Bucky took. How many times they came close to death. And we zoom in on a very aged Steve Rogers. He looks to be definitely in his 70s, perhaps 80s at this point. So the super soldier serum has not been keeping him too young.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out he's wearing his military uniform, right? He's not in civilian attire here. He's wearing what it looks to be an army uniform because it has the insignia on it. So yeah.
And then sitting up on the stage with him, it appears to be a very aged Dum Dum Dugan, because it's hard to miss that the bowler hat, right?
Bowler hat, right?
Cut the next page, the English Channel, April 1945, and we see an island, and we see a very small drone plane with the propeller in the front going off a runway, leaving a castle. And we're seeing a very familiar scene. And it's Bucky on top of the drone plane and Cap trying to hold on for dear life. And we've all seen how this works out.
Yeah, we know how this ends.
Bucky, I'm losing my grip. Steve, here, take my hand. It's probably booby-trapped. It is. I see it. No time for subtlety. And Steve reaches underneath the wing and he pulls out the wires. We cut to the next page. What? It didn't blow up.
It didn't. We haven't seen this before.
And there's Steve and Bucky on top of the plane, and they're getting it to circle back to the castle. Now let's see if we can get this package to return to sender. Now, Bob, in the 40s, that song didn't come out for a couple 20 years, right?
That's right. Return to sender.
Yeah.
Address unknown.
Maybe this is where Elvis got the inspiration.
Perhaps.
Herr Baron, the drone plane. Was is 9? You gotta love it.
I love that.
It's Heinrich Zemo, the original Zemo here, wearing his mask and crown all in glory, and here's the plane coming back at him, and Cap and Bucky are hanging on the wings, and you see a very scared Zemo with his hands up saying 9. Now, go, go. And Bucky and Steve drop off, and then the plane collides into the castle, blowing up everybody there.
Well, that didn't end the way that we expected.
Sure didn't.
Nope.
We did it, Steve. Zemo's dead. What now? Cut to the next page. Berlin, Germany, April 1945. And it's Edward R. Murrow. He was a pretty famous reporter back then, right?
He sure was, for CBS, broadcasting out of London.
You know, Bob, since you do the announcer voice most often, do you want to do his voice in your best Edward R. Murrow impersonation?
Well, I'll give it a try. I only do one voice, Rick, so you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. That's what we tell my son. I'm telling you the same thing. This is Edward R. Murrow broadcasting live from the fall of Berlin. And this reporter, for one, will never forget the thing we saw in this city over the past few days. When Captain America and the invaders led Allied troops to victory over the last Nazi regiments holding the city. Though our crew was as far from the action as possible, the final battle between Masterman and the invaders was still awe-inspiring. The blows these superhumans struck shook the very ground under our feet. And even half a block away, the heat from the Human Torch's flaming form was blistering.
Now, this is pretty cool art going on here, right? So we see Cap leading the invaders and going toe to toe with the Nazi soldiers, and then you see Namor going, punching out Masterman, which is always really cool. And we get to the next page.
The death of the Red Skull was not captured on film, but the image of his fallen form with his longtime enemy standing over him was broadcast around the world last night, as was the most amazing part of the whole week, when this morning Captain America and Bucky emerged from a bunker under the city with the Fuhrer himself in their custody. Yes, Adolf Hitler, leader of the Third Reich, the worst mass murderer in modern history, will be brought to justice now for all the world to see. It's truly a great day in Berlin, a day this reporter, for one, often wondered if he'd live to see.
How cool is that?
That is pretty cool.
On one page, we have Cap standing over a defeated Red Skull and Cap and Bucky capturing Adolf Hitler.
Indeed.
Doesn't get much better than that.
They got to him before Human Torch did.
So one of the things about House of M was the Scarlet Witch had warped reality to basically give everybody their dreams. She figured that if everybody was happy, they would leave her alone. Right? Like if everybody was, fulfilling and, all of the things that they always wanted, that they would leave her alone.
Yeah.
And so what would make Steve Rogers happier than defeating the Red Skull, defeating Adolf Hitler, and winning the war?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what he and Bucky were all about.
So we cut back to the dinner, and we have Dum Dum Dugan up at their podium giving a talk. There to watch him fight the Red Skull on the rooftop in Berlin. Say, saw clear as day. That Nazi coward jumped to his own death when he realized he had no way out. These kids today, they don't understand. Everyone's special now. Everyone's a mutant or a superhero. But back then, guys like Cap, they were a rare breed. And they won that damn war for us. And Dum Dum's looking pretty darn old. Right?
Yeah, it looks like he's got the diabetes.
Mm.
Right? Yeah, it looks like Wilford Brimley a little bit there going on.
He does. Now, here's a scary thing. Do you remember the movie Cocoon?
I sure do, Rick. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm about to say?
I have an inkling of what you're going to say.
Do you know how old Wilford Brimley was when they released the movie Cocoon?
I don't, Rick, but I gotta assume he was in an old folks home. He must have been in his late 60s.
Yeah, he was 50. 50, Bob.
Really?
50.
50.
50.
Oh my goodness.
I remember seeing that movie in the theater with my parents. Right?
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it going, wow,
Wow.
those are some old people there.
Yeah. Right.
And that movie came out in 1985.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
1985. You remember how old you were?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yep,
you were
senior
probably
high
looking
school.
at that going, wow, those people look really, really old.
Yeah.
Bob, we're now older than Wilford Brimley was at that
Right.
time.
And now I fully understand why they were willing to jump into that pool and suck all the energy out of those alien pods. Even though they knew it was not doing a good thing for those alien pods, right?
Yeah.
They were so desperate to get a little bit of their health and vitality back.
You know what? My wife and I saw last week for the first time. I've never seen the movie before in my entire life. Hot Tub Time Machine.
I have not seen it.
The premise is, and I didn't know John Cusack was in this movie. But anyway, there are these guys look like they're in their 40s, you know, and they took a friend back to the ski lodge where they had, when they were like 18, had like the night of their life.
Yeah.
And they're trying to cheer him up. So they take him back there and they get into this hot tub, and the hot tub, something happens. And then when they come out of the hot tub, they're back in that time in the 80s.
Yeah.
In that same room, that same lodge.
Okay.
And they're back in their bodies.
Yeah.
Now they don't know at first that they're in their bodies, but they're back in their teenage bodies. They look in the mirror and they see like, oh my God, it's my teenage body. But one of the things that stood out to me was they went skiing and they were like, I feel great. And they're like, doing stuff. And like, like I haven't felt this good in years.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And, I'm like, sometimes I think about that, because every day there's something that hurts. Every day.
New. Right.
Right. Yeah. And or something that's not new and just won't go away.
Yeah.
But and I'm like, I don't remember the last time I didn't hurt.
Right. I'm like, why is my foot hurting right now? Like, is that normal? Like, why would my foot just hurt? It's not like I went on like a road march or something, or was kickboxing. There's no reason for a foot to just hurt.
Well, it's not just me.
No. I'd be jumping in that pool. I don't care.
Hell yeah. Or at least dipping the foot.
You're dipping the foot, right.
All right. So getting back to the comic, Steve's listening to all this and he has a smile on his face and he thinks to himself, Dum Dugan. Haven't seen him since when? Was it the wedding? Was it actually that long ago? Washington, D.C., January 1946. Nice transition that long ago.
Right.
And we're in the White House, and there's Steve Rogers in his military uniform, standing in front of the president. Which president is that, Bob?
That'd be Harry Truman.
Yeah, it is. What years did he serve, Bob?
Gosh, it would have to be what, late 1945? No, I don't know, around mid 1945 to
1945.
Yeah, he served
8 years later.
I don't know. Yeah. Eisenhower took over for him.
I hear through the grapevine that you're thinking of getting married, Corporal Rogers. Is that correct? Corporal Rogers.
Nice. Congratulations on the promotion.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Assuming that you have no objections, sir. No objections, certainly. The war is over. You served your country far more than we could have asked. You deserve some happiness now. Thank you, sir. I just did what I could, like all the other soldiers. Always modest, Rogers. In any case, Bess would box my ears right off my head if I didn't let her personal hero tie the knot. But I do have a few concerns. As you know, our relations with the Soviets are not good, even after the alliance we had. And while I can't see us going to battle with them, tensions are going to be high there for some time, and we may need to call on you again from time to time. I'll be here whenever you need me, Mr. President. I knew you would be, Rogers. So, who's the lucky gal, and does she know what she's getting into? She better. She's a spy. I met her while she was working alongside the French resistance. Well, then, I wish you both luck. Now, come walk in the garden with me. I want to talk to you about these mutants I've been hearing about. Cut to the next page, and we are looking at a photo of Steve and Peggy's wedding. And can you name any of the characters here in the photo, Bob?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like we have Dum Dums there, of course, because we know that he was at the wedding, and it looks like maybe Bucky is there with Namor, and we're assuming this is Peggy. He's marrying, standing alongside Steve. And then we've got Nick Fury, and that could be the Human Torch, Jim Hammond, with maybe Toro, and I'm not sure who's in the wheelchair. Perhaps Charles Xavier.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Yeah.
Hmm.
Is this or is this not a photograph from your wedding, Captain? So they're at the Senate hearings on mutant activity in the United States in 1951. So a few years have passed. And there's Captain America in full Captain America uniform sitting there in front of the Senate. And they're looking at the photo. Yes, it is Senator McCarthy. And is that or is that not Prince Namor, the Submariner, as he was known during the war, standing not 2 feet away from your bride? That's Namor right next to Peggy. Yes. And yet you're refusing to answer our questions about this mutant, while clearly you've maintained a friendship with him beyond your missions together during the war. I'm not entirely clear why I'm being questioned about Namor at all, Senator. Maybe that's the problem. You're out of order, Captain. We're asking the questions here, not you. Now, unless you've been sleeping through this last several years, you'll have seen the reports of mutant activity in this country. Like that little nod there, Bob. Right?
Right.
Sleeping through the last several years as he turn a few pages here. I got 3 pages of ads here.
Mm.
They've infiltrated all aspects of our society. They're practically taken over Hollywood, trying to spread their message to our children. And what message would that be, Senator? That they're normal, that they're just the same as us. Did you know studies indicate that nearly 1 in every 5,000 U.S. citizens is now born a mutant, Rogers? I was unaware of that, Senator. Well, now you're aware, and maybe now you'll answer our questions. I've got some questions about another friend of yours as well, that sidekick of the Human Torch, that Toto. His name's Toro, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline to answer any questions about him too, Senator. This is over, and he stands up. You sit right back down, Rogers. You'll do as you're ordered. That uniform you wear puts you under our command as much as it does the president's. If that's the case, then I'm afraid I'll resign, Senator McCarthy, because I didn't sign on for this. I won't inform on my friends. I won't watch my country sink into fear while you get drunk on your own power. Out of order! Sir, you are out of order! And he pulls his mask off, and there's a whole bunch of flash bulbs going off as the press is taking photos. Now we cut 4 years later, 1955, and we're on the moon, Bob.
Holy cow.
Astro 5 has landed. We have lunar contact. You are go for a lunar walk, Colonel Rogers. And then we see an astronaut coming out of onto the moon. Right. Oh boy. Well, say something, Rogers. You were Captain America, right? Give me something newsworthy to film here. This is one small step for man, one giant leap for peace between man and mutant kind. How's that for newsworthy, Watts? And then we cut to the streets, and people are looking in windows that have TVs for sale, and the TVs are on, and that's how. What, Bob? Did that really happen? I mean, is this like an old trope cliche that in movies and in
Right.
comics and in books and in TV shows, to in order to advance the story, they decide to put it through the news, which is fine,
Yeah.
but to have a whole bunch of TVs
Yeah.
in a window shop, on a
Right.
street, and people are watching the news. That's how
Yeah.
they're watching the news, is through all these TV. By the way, they can't hear it through the glass. I don't care what anybody says, right? So they're just reading lips, as far as I
Right.
can tell.
Yeah.
Did that really happen? I mean,
I
you're
don't
old.
know.
Did that
Yeah.
really happen back then?
I didn't get out much, Rick. I caught my news sitting at the bar watching the TV over the barkeep. That's the other trope,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah. So
Hey, turn that up, right?
there you go. Right. Yeah.
Hey, Bob, it's an announcer. You want to do the voice?
Why not? Why not? Astronaut Steve Rogers' controversial first word from the moon have been the talk of the nation these past weeks. But sources at NASA were quick to point out that Rogers was merely trying to acknowledge that it was only through the combined work of human and mutant scientists that the United States was able to reach the moon so early in the space race. Russia, where mutants are still banned from scientific work, has only recently been able to send an orbiter around Earth with any success. Nevertheless, Rogers, who many may recall fought during the war as Captain America, has long been cast by anti mutant groups as a mutant sympathizer.
So then we cut to Peggy and Steve sitting and watching this news report in their home. And I don't know, Bob, does she have a French accent, an English accent, an American accent? What does Peggy Carter have? I'm so confused now.
Yeah, I don't know. In this is she? Yeah, was she a British spy in this one, or was she a good old Virginia girl? Right, as we know her in the rest of Volume 5. Good question.
You just had to say that, didn't you, Steve? Stop, Peggy. You can never just leave well enough alone. Do you realize what they're going to say to me at the office now? What? Is your agency spying on mutants now instead of our enemies? These people are American citizens, you know. SHIELD keeps an eye on a lot of people, Steve, at home and abroad. At least your old friend Buck Barnes understands that. What? Bucky's working for SHIELD now? You could have been too, Steve, but no, the great Captain America has to get all his old military friends to pull strings so he can be an astronaut, even after he embarrassed himself in front of the whole Senate. And she walks away.
Wow.
New York City, 1957. So here we are a couple years later, and we're at a bar. You know how I know that, Bob?
How do you know that, Rick?
There's a sign that says bar.
Ah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like a nice place.
I was sorry to hear about you and Peggy. I would have thought the two of you go the distance. Me too, Buck. It's just things change. She never wanted to be an astronaut's wife, and she was never too thrilled with the way I gave up the mask either. That shocked a lot of people, Steve, me included. I told you that then. Sure. But what would you have done if they asked you to testify against Toro for simply being who he is? I don't know. Probably the same thing you did, but it's hard to say. Luckily, they didn't ask me. Don't tell me working for SHIELD has turned you paranoid about mutants too? Toro was your best friend. Sure, he was, Steve, but that was a different world. And like you said, things change. The whole mutant issue isn't as black and white as it looks. Sure, there's guys like Toro who fought the good fight, beside us, and there's the hyper intelligent scientists that helped us kick the Ruskies' butts. But in Eastern Europe, you've got some mutant rights groups that are essentially terrorists. There are human terrorists in the world too, Bucky. Terror isn't exclusive. Sure, except with these mutants, they don't plant bombs, they are the bombs. And Steve just looks down. I think that's an interesting point. I see where both men are coming from.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that goes with anytime people stereotype another set of people. They'll point out, these are the bad things, right? And I love Steve's comment here that, well, yeah, but humans have terrorists too, right? It's not, terror is not just with one type of thing, and I think that could be said for a lot of things. It's almost like when we talked with Paul Jenkins when he was on the show, and he talked about theater of war and the differences between Germans and Nazis. And just because you're a soldier in the German army, you could be a patriot, right?
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
not a Nazi. It's the
Right.
ones that went that far and became Nazis. They're different. And so anyway, I don't know. I found that very interesting from Steve. And
Yeah.
then but Buck's got a point too,
He sure does. Yeah.
right? Is that
Mhm.
yeah, but they're not, these terrorists aren't planting bombs, they are bombs because they have the powers they have. It is a difficult topic.
Yeah. But it's one that was, woven really throughout volume 5, right? That Steve had a tendency to see the world, really in black and white. And stood firm on his principles, where Bucky was the sidekick that saw the world in grays and was willing to like bend, oftentimes to great extents, to get the job done.
Right.
So we're seeing that play out here as well.
Yeah, it's funny you should say black and white and everything, because it reminds me, and I posted this in the Captain America Facebook group, but the recent JMS series, there was a 2-part story in issues 7 and 8 where, and we'll get to this another episode. JMS decides to give Steve Rogers a birthday.
Right. Yeah.
Month, day, year.
Yeah.
Boom.
Boom. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Decades in the making.
What's interesting to me is he's a Libra, I'm a Libra, and so a lot of the characteristics that they're talking about in here, I think of myself as having those characteristics. I've had people tell me they think I've had those characteristics, which is really cool, and we'll get to that another time. But one of the things that stood out was the whole black and white and gray thing, and there's the person who's writing his reading says in here, Librans are deep thinkers who start off thinking everything is black and white, only to figure out one day that everything's gray.
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you how many times I've been accused of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The world is black and white, anyway.
And people accuse, and how many times has Steve Rogers been accused of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That it's the world's not easy to figure out. It's complex. There's nuance, and there's sometimes, Cap always says there's a better way. There's a different way, right? And but sometimes, is there? Right? Maybe. Yeah, maybe if you have enough time to like figure out what it is. But Buck's always been, like, got to get the job done. And sometimes it's ugly, and sometimes it's not nice, and sometimes it doesn't make us feel good, or it makes us feel dirty, right? That we violated our principles. So again, we see that being played out over beer, in their later years here.
And of course, as the decades passed, Buck's words stayed with me. And there were a lot of truth in them. The mutant issue wasn't black and white. It was about politics and prejudice and fear. It was about shades of gray. And there were shades of gray among mutant kind, too. They were heroes and leaders, and they were criminals and despots. Why not, right? Why should mutants be different than anyone else? And while I spoke for equal rights for all people, regardless of race, creed, color, or genetics, I also bore witness to a changing world as the mutant population explosion became something undeniable. Regardless of how mankind felt, it was clear we would soon be a minority. And in this period of change, one mutant rose to prominence: Magus. After his destruction of the Sentinels program in the early 70s, the rushing tide finally overtook us. Magnus was suddenly spoken of as a world leader. He was meeting with the United Nations and discussing ideas. And maybe it was the stubborn old warhouse in me, but Magnus' vision of the future, his ideas for peace, they didn't sit well with me, and perhaps foolishly, I said so. And then we see Steve Rogers in his military uniform at a podium at a rally, and he's got his hands in the air. We're watching as leaders all over the world are falling into line, falling all over themselves to agree with Magnus. You all know what I bear no ill towards mutants. I judge man and mutant alike by their deeds and their words. And I tell you right here and now that in Magnus's words, I hear echoes of men I have faced before. Men like Mussolini and Stalin. Men like Hitler. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised when I was forced to take an early retirement from the Air Force soon after the speech. It turned out that Magnus had already gotten much further inside the system than anyone realized, and dissent was not going to be tolerated. It's amazing how quickly the world can pass you by, can make you irrelevant. From then on, the only people interested in talking to me were the radical human separatist movements, and I wanted nothing to do with them. It wasn't about keeping mutants and humans apart. It was about making sure the people in charge weren't selling us out. But no one would listen. In the late 70s, when Bucky was killed in the line of duty, I was not allowed to speak at his funeral. I was never even told the circumstances of his death, though reading between the lines, it seemed clear it had something to do with a shield op on Genosha. Where's Genosha, Bob?
It's off the coast of Africa, isn't it? Just north of Madagascar.
Yeah, but what is it?
Well, it's an island that Magneto rules for mutants.
That's right. And S.H.I.E.L.D. would soon be yet another arm of Magnus's world, which I doubt Buck would have found ironic. Maybe it was already starting then. Peggy wasn't even at the funeral. So we cut back to the beginning of the story, where Steve was sitting on the stage, kind of thinking to himself. Here it is, 50 years since the day I walked on the moon, and I'm still thinking about Peggy. I wonder what she'd think of this dinner they threw for me. Probably wouldn't be too impressed, though at least Namor's son showed up. She'd like to meet him, I bet. But me? What can I say here? I captured Adolf Hitler in his bunker. I walked on the moon. In the end, there's not much more to do than thank the people who walked beside me, those who triumphed and those who fell. All the rest are just leaves scattered to the winds of history. And then we see him walking after the dinner is over through the city. The history of a world that no longer exists, that's no longer relevant. And he's going down into the subway, and as he's about to go through the turnstiles, there's these young teenage mutant punks that are rushing him and going by. Out of the way, old sapien. Yeah, move your ass, Grandpa. Make way for the Mute Crew review. What? You think you hard? That's what I thought. Steve just puts his hat back on and walks to the subway car. So hard to believe this is the world we fought for. that this is the world Bucky and so many others died for. A world where humans have been pushed aside for mutants. It sounds naive to say it, but it just doesn't seem fair. I guess you just never know how life will go. I could have died 100 times in the war, but instead, I lived through it. I captured Hitler with my own 2 hands. And then I got to walk on the moon 10 years later. Guess that's not too shabby, right? And what is it Peggy used to say? You got everything you wanted, Steve Rogers. If the world didn't turn out to how you thought it would, well, that's just life. Still, I thought it'd be a lot different than this. The end. And
Wow.
the very last panel, we see up on a rooftop looking down on Steve as he's walking in the nighttime sky are a bunch of characters that maybe want to talk to him. One of them looks like Wolverine, another one like maybe Peter Parker, perhaps Luke Cage, and a few ladies there. And that story to continue, I'm sure, in House of M.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Bob?
Wow, that's a depressing story.
Yeah, thanks for picking it out.
But it's interesting, right? Because as you said, Steve got what he wanted. He got to capture Hitler, Red Skull, and Baron Zemo. Their threat was ended. He got to walk on the moon, and I gotta I cannot. Maybe one of our listeners can help me out, but I know Steve's interest of being an astronaut has been talked about someplace, and I cannot for the life of me remember where that was. I don't think this was just that was not just pulled out of the ether here. I'm pretty sure it was mentioned someplace. So hopefully somebody can give me that lead. But in any case, he got what he wanted. So, but it's like the Garth Brooks story, right? Thank God for unanswered prayers. Sometimes we don't get what we want, and
That's
that
true.
leads us to something better, and quite different than what we expected. And so, we kind of see that here where he got what he wanted, but maybe that's not what he needed, or what the world needed.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a lesson here.
Yeah, this story kind of reminds me a little bit of that What If story we covered. It was What If 5. What if Cap and Bucky had lived?
Right.
It was a 1977 story. We covered it panel by panel in episode 53, if anybody wants to check that out. But, Bucky goes on to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. Things didn't kind of work out, as well. Yeah, it has a little bit of, this definitely felt like a what if story, right?
It did. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I guess they just call it multiverse now, right? More explicitly. Yeah, it's sad. It's melancholy. And it makes you wonder, what if all your high school dreams had come true? Would you be happy? Maybe.
I would have been a Playboy photographer.
Exactly. Right?
Right.
Think about all the things you have in your life and the people you have in your life that you wouldn't have, right? You wouldn't have met. Yeah, you would have done without some of the sorrows along the way, but you wouldn't have had all the things and people that you have now. And I think about that, right? I mean, I didn't. Certainly, the journey that your life takes is the journey your life is supposed to take, and we see in the House of M, and in the case of Steve Rogers, what happens when it's a different course.
So, Bob, I go first.
All right.
So you went first last time. So I'm going to go with my favorite panel.
All right, do it.
I'm going to go with, and these, I'm looking at an actual comic which does not have page numbers at the end. So I'm trying to work with me here, but it's page 6. And it is panel 3. And it's the one where Cap and Bucky are dragging Adolf Hitler
Oh, nice.
out.
Yeah.
And you know what? And the soldiers are cheering, and Cap's just holding Adolf Hitler there. That's got to be my favorite panel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, come on.
Right. I like that. I like that one. But
What
we
about
all
you?
love to see that one. I'm going to go with the wedding photo of
Nice.
Steve and Peggy and Dum Dum and Namor and Bucky and the whole gang's there. And it's a sort of a sepia toned coloring to that particular panel. And of course, Fury got a cigar in his mouth, and I don't know. I like that, right? Because it's before things go bad for he's at the top of his game, top of the world. He's got his girl. Future's bright ahead of him. All his friends are there, and it's just a happy moment.
Indeed. Yeah.
So love it.
What about T-shirt, Bob? What are you putting on a T-shirt?
I got to go with the 9.
That's a good one.
Yeah, just that one panel of Heinrich Zemo, scared for his life seconds before that drone impacts on him. 9, just that on the shirt.
Yeah, I like it.
And yourself?
I'm going to go with this ad.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
I'm putting this ad of bod on a T-shirt. I want all the girls saying, what are they saying? I want your bod.
That's really in your face advertising right there.
Yeah, right. On the T-shirt, I'm going to go with the last panel in page 10, which is the one where McCarthy's saying, "Out of order, sir. You were out of order." And Cap's got his back to us, and he's taking his mask off, and all the flash bulbs are going off. Right. I think that's a nice horizontal, kind of T-shirt. That would look good across the chest, don't you think?
I like that. That's a good selection. Nicely done. And how about your time capsule?
Oh, time capsule. I'm going to go with page 5, panel 1, and that is Edward R. Murrow broadcasting live from the fall of Berlin. I think that's I think that's kind of cool, right? That's April of 1945, very much a period of time, and a cool one at that. Yeah. So I'm going to go with that in my time capsule.
Do you know what? Do you know what Edward Murrow's catchphrase was?
I don't.
Yeah, he closed every broadcast with "Good night and good luck." Yeah.
That sounds familiar. Okay, I think I've heard that before. Yeah,
probably heard recordings of it.
That's it, Bob. From now on, that's how we're going to end the podcast. Good night. Luck. Take luck.
Take luck. Good for you. Arrivederci. Yeah, for my time capsule, Rick, I'm going with the second panel of the first page. So it's that one you specifically mentioned as we embarked on this journey this evening of you can see the guests of honor on the stage and the viewers behind them, and you're looking out on the audience, all these folks. Not that many of them, right? You mentioned the fact that there's probably maybe 12.5 folks in attendance, a lot of empty chairs, a lot of old, very bored-looking individuals at this celebratory dinner. But the one thing you don't see there, Rick, is what? Not a single cell phone. Nobody's taking pictures. Nobody's filming videos. Nobody's scrolling through their timeline or their feed, right? They may be bored, but they're paying attention. And if you were to draw this panel today, sure as heck, there would be, the artists were drawing some cell phones because this is a time gone by. And it wasn't that long ago, right? 2005, right? 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. But that time has gone by.
It's a sad panel, though.
It
right?
is.
I mean, they're honoring Steve Rogers, and there's so few people turning out.
There's actually one guy. He's like looking the other way. His back is
he's having his dinner. He's like, "You're interrupting my dinner for this."
I got to get through this so I can get up and get seconds before anybody else does.
Oh boy!
Right.
Anyway, thanks for suggesting this one, Bob. It was such a uplifting story. And well, listen, we don't do Ed Ed Brubaker very often because his stories are so long. So we had to, it was good to pick a single issue like this.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested. I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts about this story and what they got from it, and hopefully we'll hear maybe some feedback on the podcast or in the comments in the Facebook group.
Yep. Next episode. So I mentioned this before about the Taco Bell special that we did, and it was written by who?
Joe Caramanga.
Exactly. So Joe Caramanga is actually going to join us next episode. Now, sure, he wrote the Taco Bell Captain America story, and he's written a bunch of other things too. But we see his name all the time as letterer. In fact, he's the letterer on the current Captain America JMS series. He's been the letterer on several other Captain America stories that we have done over the last 20 some years. Bob, we've had writers, we've had editors, we've had pencilers, we've had inkers, we've had colorists, we've had VP executives of Marvel on the show. We've never had a letterer. Right. I got lots of questions.
Yes.
I can't wait to talk to Joe Caramanga next episode.
Yes. Yo quiero Joe Caramanga. See what I did there? Yeah.
I want you to, I hope you do that when he's on the show. That'll be great. So come back next episode for that. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. That'd be a great guest. I know it.
All right, Bob. As always, I've had a lot of fun wrapping cap with you.
It has. Let's do it again next week, Rick.
Excellent. All right. Well, he's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis. And you, if you don't mind, please rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, please smash that thumb up button and subscribe. And again, any platform you're on, we love to hear the comments. So please continue to send those, and maybe we'll read them here. So, and as always, you've been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.